Welcome, everyone. Welcome to today's 7th final webinar in our series with Avant Learning and the Mississippi Foreign Language Association. We're so glad that you guys could join us today. Today, we have two special presenters. We have TJ Troche and Ryan Smith, who are going to be sharing some ideas with us around biliteracy. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started so that I can turn things over to our presenters. Just a few things for everyone to be aware of as we get started. Well, I'm Dawn Samples. I am the director for Avant Learning at Avant Assessment. And today's webinar title is Fostering Biliteracy for All Students, Strategies for Including Heritage and Native Learners. So it's a very timely topic for us to be having discussion around right now. Excuse me. Just a few things for you guys to be keeping in mind. Those of you who've been joining us every day for the webinar series with MFLA, welcome back. We're so glad that you came back to join us again. Want to make sure that everyone knows how to follow MFLA. They do have a web page, a Twitter account, and a Facebook group. So make sure you check those out. I'll be posting those in the chat for you. Also want to make sure that you know that you will get a certificate of attendance. I know there was an issue with the link last week, but we got all of that fixed and resolved. So if you haven't gone back to check yet, make sure you go back and look. So you'll get a certificate after you do the post-webinar survey. Also, tomorrow you'll receive an email, and in that email you will have a folder where you can access the chat from today's chat, which, by the way, if you're in the chat, go ahead and introduce yourself so we know who's joining us today. You'll get a link to the slide deck, and you'll get a link to the recorded webinar, which will be on our YouTube channel. And you can always access it from the YouTube channel if you want to view it later or share it with other people. Want to make sure you also stay up to date on what other webinars and professional learning that we have out there. So be sure that you follow More Learning on Twitter. You can join our Facebook group, and you can also access resources that we have bookmarked on our Wakelet. And the idea is there for that also. So I'll be sharing this in the chat with you guys too, so you can always catch up with that later. All right, so we have with us again today our partners from MFLA, Michael Raines and Edgar Serrano, who are both on the board for MFLA. Michael is the VP of Programs, and Edgar is the Executive Director. Both Michael and Edgar are also professors at the University of Mississippi. So want to welcome both of you. We're so glad that you could be with us and that you've partnered with us on this adventure.
Welcome, everyone. I'm so happy that you're back with us for our final webinar, and it's great having you here. Thanks.
Hello, world language teachers. Thank you for starting the week with us today, Monday, and we have a great webinar. Thank you, Dawn and Avant, for helping make this webinar series possible. To the Department of Modern Languages at the University of Mississippi, thank you for the support for providing the CEUs for teachers. And to TJ and Ryan, thank you for sharing your expertise with all of us. So let's get.
So as Edgar was saying, we have two very special guests with us today who are also two very good friends of mine. We have Ryan Smith, who is the, oh gosh, there's so many things that Ryan does. He wears a lot of hats. Ryan is the past Supervisor of the Year, 2018 NADSville Supervisor of the Year. He's the 2015 Nevada World Languages Teacher of the Year. He's also a district coordinator for CTE, AVID, and World Languages. And TJ is a Spanish teacher at Spring Valley High School. He's the president of the State Organization of Nevada, PLAN. He's also was the 2016 World Language Teacher of the Year. So TJ has joined us on some webinars in the past that we've done with AATSP, and he is on the board of directors for AATSP as well. So we're so glad to have both of you join us today, TJ and Ryan. And I am going to turn things over to you in just a second. Want to make sure that our viewers know how to follow you guys on the internet via Facebook, via Twitter, and how to reach out to you for email. So without further ado, Ryan and TJ, I am turning things over to you.
Thank you so much, Dawn, and 100% thank you also to Avant and MFLA for making this webinar series happen, and for inviting your amigos from the Wild West to be a part of this, to finish up this series with you today. We would love to have participants today follow us on those platforms, Plan NV on Facebook, Plan NV on Twitter, and both of our personal accounts as well. Let's see if I can get my little arrow down here to advance the slide. There she is. Cool. Ryan.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, from a beautiful Silver State of Nevada. We just want to go over the outcomes and goals of today's session. And what I really want you to keep in mind is we're really focusing on all students. So how can we provide biliteracy strategies to engage all students, but we're really going to focus on heritage and native speakers today. And so a lot of the strategies you'll see and you'll learn about today, I just want you to keep in mind that they are for all students, but we always want to consider our heritage and native speakers when we're doing anything in our classes.
And I think that the new seal of biliteracy in the state of Mississippi, I think that heritage and native learners can be a big contingent in awarding students those seals as seniors, and for building your language programs and all that good stuff. Just as a sort of disclaimer, Ryan and I both have a background in teaching Spanish, so many of the examples we'll give are what we've done with native and heritage learners of Spanish, but can absolutely be modified for native and heritage learners of anyone you have in your classroom. We've got a little audience participation to ask for. Let's see what everybody's understanding is. So if you would please, we're going to push out some Q&A questions for you that you can respond to right there on your screen. Dawn, I think you can do those for us.
I just launched it. Yeah, it's out there now. So if you guys will take just a second to respond to the poll.
Now we want you to go with your gut answer here. Go with your gut feeling. And we'll come back to the responses in just a little bit.
No one will see your answers, so please answer honestly.
And just as a side note also, if anybody has any questions along the way, you can type those either in the chat box or in the Q&A. And I think we're watching on Twitter also under that hashtag Empowering with Languages.
So we should have like 4 screens or 5 screens open and phones, and there's a lot going on in this presentation. 21st century learning.
Right.
So far, we have about 93 responses out of 150.
Great.
So we're getting there, about 63%.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
These are some things to think about when we just kind of wanted to get you thinking about how you address heritage and native learners' needs in your classroom, and when it comes to the seal of biliteracy in the state of Mississippi, what your thinking is there. And we'll come back to these to see the responses again during our first Twitter break in just a few minutes. So What do you think, Dawn? Are we okay on time?
We are, yes, we're up to about 110. So I'll give you guys just a few more seconds and then I'll end the poll so it will disappear off of your screens. And then we'll look at the results in just a few minutes when you're ready.
Great.
Thank you, Dawn.
Awkward silence, awkward silence.
Okay, I have ended the poll. And so when you are ready, we can launch the results.
Awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to go back to my little arrows over here. There we go. And Ryan, take it.
All right.
Somewhere.
So we're going to see the results of that poll here in a few minutes, but what we really want you to consider today are the specific differentiated needs of heritage speakers and learners learning a language for the first time. So hopefully you can think of some differences between the two students. But what we'd like you to do right now in the chat box is to just let's get a kind of a brainstorm going. What are the needs of heritage learners? And then what are the needs of L2 learners? So if you could, in the chat box, just start your answer maybe with heritage learners or L2 learners. Let's just, we want to hear what you have to say about this. So in the chat box, just write some differences between these two students.
Top 2 specific language needs, how they might differ, heritage learners and second language learners.
All right, we see that heritage learners need practice on reading and writing, improving spelling. L2 needs speaking support. Yes, input. Wow, you guys are fast in the chat box.
Yep.
All right, so we are seeing a lot of literacy needs in the chat box. And, you know, the purpose of this presentation is, like I said, if we go back to those goals and outcomes, thinking about how we can support all students when we have mixed classes of heritage and native speakers. Gosh, you have some great responses in the chat box. Yeah, L2 need vocabulary.
All right, we're gonna move on. And
yeah, great responses. Thank you.
Awesome responses. Now let's see what your presenters came up with for these two groups. So for a heritage learner, we like to say that they can function in authentic situations, where that's not to say that L2 learners at certain levels cannot, or that they are functioning in non-authentic situations, but more authentic situations and more easily. And that is because they have the added advantage of having that larger vocabulary that our second language learners have to really, really work for. Another thing is, of course, the target language is spoken at home. That is another definite advantage. Often our heritage and native learners that we have in our classes come in with some colloquial and informal registers, which I want to be absolutely clear on is valid language. It's language that serves a purpose. It is authentic language, and it can be very useful. What we often have to teach there is, you know, the when and where to say what to whom is really what we have to look at there when it comes to register. And this came up a lot in the box, or in the chat box, is that they need that extra support with literacy, with reading and writing. Reading and writing doesn't tend to be one of their strengths because their schooling has been in English. Their education has been in English. So reading and writing in Spanish unless their parents have, or in whatever their heritage language happens to be, unless their parents have really supported that at home. That's typically where they need a lot of their extra support. And in a traditional L2 class, in a second language class, they're not going to be challenged in their heritage language very much, because what the needs are for our L2 learners are pretty contrasted. In that their strengths are the strengths of our heritage kiddos are going to be more listening and speaking, and those are the things that our L2 learners struggle with. I think you will agree. And Ryan, what do you think about those L2 kids?
Well, I can relate with them, TJ, because I am an L2 kid myself. So,
Heritage learner.
yes. You know, I remember being a French student and then a Spanish student, and functioning in the language was extremely challenging for me at first. And so, you know, L2 learners have very limited vocabulary of the target language at a very low proficiency level to start with. Of course, the target language is not spoken at home as a primary language. It might be spoken by parents or relatives, but we want to think that it's not the primary language spoken at home. Okay, one thing an L2 learner can do fairly easily is differentiate between the formal and informal registers, because that's how they're taught in class. So they have, sometimes they have a pretty strong grasp on language register. Usually they learn speaking and literacy skills simultaneously. So thinking about how we learn language naturally, this kind of goes against that theory of how we process language naturally, where an L2 learner does learn how to speak and listen and do the literacy piece at the same time. And then, oh, my heart goes out to them, because I was one of them. The L2 class is extremely challenging for students, and especially when there are native and heritage speakers in the same class. All right, again, with that listening comprehension and speaking, that's the most challenging part for an L2 learner.
I just briefly saw someone in the chat box mention that heritage learners absolutely 100% have the cultural advantage as well of being familiar with target culture.
Yes.
Okay, we got this. Okay, sorry, my presentation's broken, but we're gonna get through this.
We still love you, TJ.
And we're gonna go this way. There we go.
Okay, and so we're going to talk about teachers' approach to teaching heritage learners. And I saw some of you refer to this in the chat box just now. So we want to keep in mind as educators that, again, if we could go back to those goals and outcomes for the webinar, we want to talk about all students and providing opportunities for all students. So we definitely, as educators, want to never make students feel that their language that they come in with is wrong or any less valuable than what we want to teach them. And so we have some examples. These are some Spanish heritage examples. So we oftentimes hear heritage speakers called lunch, lonche, or they're gonna go get their homework out of their troca in the parking lot. They like to carry their wonderful carpeta, right? This is carpeta. But a carpeta for a heritage learner could be what's on the floor in their house. And a lot of them aplicar para un trabajo. And so this is the language they bring in. Sometimes it's a lot of Spanglish, but we never want them to feel that their language is wrong or language shame a student ever. That's a one-way ticket to disengaging a student is to language shame them.
Totally agree there, Ryan. We don't want to language shame. And something else that I think we don't want to do is claim to be perfect in our own language, and claim to know all regionalisms and dialectical differences and lexical variations and things like that, because it's kind of impossible. I feel like that is going to be the first step for any teacher in a heritage class to take, whether you are a heritage learner yourself or if you are an L2 learner of the whatever language you're teaching.
All right, and then of course we want to show the students that we can relate to them in the language they speak, and also that we can learn from them. As teachers, hopefully we are lifelong learners, and we hold that dear to our hearts. And but we have to walk the walk and talk the talk in the classroom also. And so appreciating what students bring and validating their language, especially we want to think that a lot of their language comes from their family and their grandparents and their great-grandparents, and we would never want to tell students that their language is wrong.
Another attitude I hear too often is that a heritage class is like language rehab, and that implies that there's something that needs to be fixed, and that's not the case. Maybe there are things that need to be brought into conscience, which is cool, but fixing, that's not what we're there for.
And then celebrate what students bring. Celebrate their traditions. Honor their family, honor their experience. We're there to break down barriers and not to create them. So just something to keep in mind for sure.
Yep. Oh, it's gonna do that again. So I'm gonna have to do that manually, no big deal. And we are at our first Twitter and chat check-in, and we're gonna check out our poll results real quick. Let's look at the poll results first, and then we'll check out Twitter and stuff.
Okay, I'm gonna take the mouse from you for a second so I can share out the results.
All yours.
Here we go. Whoops, it's gonna try to do that. I'll go back. There we go. So here are the results. You guys should be able to see them on your screen. So I don't know, TJ and Ryan, if you all wanna read through those with everyone.
Yeah, so the number one, a heritage speaker is the same as a native speaker. 94% of you said false. Good job, 94% of you. They are not the same. And we can get into a little bit of what the difference is a little bit later. At number two, saying a native speaker understands the target language slang and cultural references. 84% of you said true. Good job, 84%. That is not to say that they're, of course, going to understand every target language, slang, and cultural reference. Of course, there's going to be geographic and dialectal variations and things that are going to throw things off. That's probably what the other 28% was thinking, and that's great thinking. A heritage and native language learner's needs are the same as a true second language learner. 83% said false. I would have said false myself.
Kind of a trick question, though, I think.
A little bit.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Because I think all students' needs are different. But if we're generalizing,
yeah,
very different.
Number four says biliteracy and bilingualism are not the same. 84% of you said true. Well done. Just real briefly, biliteracy means you are literate in more than one language. Bilingual means you can speak more than one language. And the seal that's offered in many states, that's why they have to show that they are indeed biliterate, that they can read and write in their languages. And number five, in order to be considered biliterate, one must be proficient in all three modes of communication. 70% said true. You must be proficient in those modes of communication in order to be considered biliterate. Well done, folks. I would say that's a that was a pretty good gauge of what we're looking at.
Yeah,
What's
I think we
Twitter
got
look
the
like?
advanced group,
Right, we did.
right?
You guys are.
Edgar got us the advanced group of educators for this one. Thank you.
So Edgar, do you want to chime in a little bit about what we're seeing on Twitter?
Well, basically, they're just very excited about the topic. I think people are agreeing that this is a perfect time to start really learning more about including the heritage speakers. And that's what they are sharing right now in Twitter. Michael, what are you seeing there on the chat room?
Some of the same things. A lot of people stated that heritage learners were not necessarily literate in the language, whereas L2 learners needed to learn more about the cultural aspects of the language. But no real questions, except for they wanted to know how you did that, the poll that you could use, that you're using.
That is Zoom magic that that Miss Dawn holds in her hands.
I love Zoom magic.
It's something available to anyone doing Zoom. That is something you can do. So, okay, TJ, I'm going to turn things back over to you now. So I'm going to see if I can get your little thing to show up here for you. There you go.
There she is.
Okay.
Yay.
Right. So let's talk about how we address the needs of all students. But before we do this, one thing I just want to throw out there is that we should never make assumptions about students either. So just because they are heritage or native speakers, we should never make the assumption that they are not literate in that language. That's why we have awesome assessments like Avant, right, Dawn? But how do we address the needs of all students? So this is just like Teacher 101 right here, with engaging lessons, with rigor, using those collaborative strategies, presentational skills, differentiation. Again, going back to not making assumptions ever about students based on their background. They're all different. They come to us from every different level, and we have to make it work for them, and we have to help them improve. And then keeping it interesting and meaningful. So world language teachers are the masters in public education of keeping things interesting and meaningful for students, and I really mean that. And then focus less on traditional approaches. Again, world language teachers are the masters of non-traditional approaches. I am so excited when I see students up and moving and just so involved and engaged in the classes. And I really see this when students leave school and they keep the learning going with world languages because they're excited about it. So world language teachers, cream of the crop for sure.
I would agree. And some of the things that we're going to show you today are that are going to come up right now are some ways, some strategies that you can use to address the needs of all students. And let's see. There we go. Here's the first strategy we'd like to take you through today. And this is one that I've had quite a bit of success with my own heritage classes, is annotating the text. If you are in a school that has the AVID program, it's sometimes called marking the text with AVID. I like to call it annotating the text because we're kind of doing more than annotating. And so let's say you have a text. Let's say you have an article that you're giving an intermediate heritage class. First thing we're going to do is number paragraphs. Second thing we're going to do is read the title and make predictions based on that title. We would share out those predictions based on what that title is. So already you're seeing we're going for literacy here. Next thing we're going to do is actually read the article. I like to change up ways that we read. Is sometimes we do free voluntary reading, sometimes we do silent sustained reading, sometimes we popcorn read, sometimes we read together as a class. But however you decide to read, kids are going to underline or highlight in one color what the main idea of each paragraph of those numbered paragraphs are. Then they're going to go back and circle or highlight in a different color some key terms. And where I always went with that was vocabulary from our unit, whatever unit we happen to be working on that I chose this resource for. And then I would have them over in a margin over on the side, write questions and unfamiliar vocabulary in the margin. That unfamiliar vocabulary actually is going to become vocabulary that may need to be assessed later on. And our last thing we're going to do is when we use that text for discussions or writing, I always have her back to the paragraph as a reference. Being able to cite evidence is a skill that is definitely going to help them when they move on to AP level courses and stuff like that. So by bringing that in with our heritage kiddos, that's a great start for moving forward to AP. Here's an example of an annotated text. So you can see there's some questions written over in the side. We've got things circled. We've got things underlined. We've got our paragraphs numbered, all that good stuff. And up on the top, you can even have your instructions written there and printed there and stuff with just a reminder of, for your heritage learners of how we want them to really interact with that text. And I found this to be a really awesome literacy strategy for me with my heritage kids.
All right, thanks, TJ.
Yep.
Another strategy, and these will be available to you, so just don't worry, you'll have copies of these templates. So this is a great strategy, before and after reflection. You know, I'll tell you again, I was one of those L2 students that the teacher would hand me an article in French or Spanish, and I would be the kid, you know, like pretending to read it behind my binder, but I really wasn't engaged in doing much of anything because it was difficult for me. So this strategy is so great. So you have them, you have an article, and you have them start engaging with the title of the article, with pictures in the article, and excuse me, and then you have them fill out this before reading reflection. And so they get to like make predictions, make their own predictions on what the article is about. And so this is just sentence stems you can use with the students. So they do the before reading reflection first. Then what they're going to do is just what TJ told you about annotating the text. They'll go through the text, they'll number the paragraphs, and then they'll do their after reading reflection. And what is so great about this, and this is such a rigorous activity, they get to self-discover and see if their predictions about the article or about the reading were correct or not. And they're really internalizing their own learning using the strategy. And so these two together, phenomenal. It's a game changer for all students.
And this is a resource that you can totally have them do in target language as well. We have the example there in English for example's sake.
Yes.
Next one. It's also, that's me. This particular one, becoming a 30-second expert. So this is really to, I found this one really helps those reluctant kids that really want to get in there and dissect the entire text and a lot of times when that happens, when they want to get in there and dissect, they're overthinking and overanalyzing. But by becoming a 30-second expert, they're getting the gist, and they have to be able to get the gist and then be able to share it. So first thing they're going to do is stand up and find a partner. They stay standing. One person shares their thoughts while the other one listens. They can't interrupt. They only have 30 seconds to share, and this is after reading, after examining, sort of skimming, let's say. And they begin by saying in the language that I'm an expert on this because I know blah, blah, blah. And they share for 30 seconds. They can't be interrupted. And then the next person will basically do the same thing. They'll begin a summary of what that other person said. And reported speech is something that a lot of learners have an issue with. So being able to listen and absorb and comprehend and process, and then be able to verbalize back what that other person said in a summary is a really challenging task. And after they give that summary, they'll ask their partner if they got that correct, and then they reverse roles. So each person is doing the same thing, and then they get a high five when they're done. Or we're not high fiving these days, we're elbow bumping, I think, or some sort of I don't know, change your emoji to happy face or something on
Yes.
on whatever, and then record the information about their conversation in an information log. I would like you guys to comment a little bit into the chat box and list a benefit that you could see from using this particular strategy. I'll give you about 30 seconds to do that. I like to use this strategy as well in mixed classes where I have some Heritage or Native students and some L2 learners. And I like to pair them up that way, to mix a Heritage or Native learner with a non-Native learner, with an L2 learner, because I find that does wonders for tuning our L2 learners' ears to Native speech. And that's something that they struggle with, because they might say to their I hear them say to teachers a lot, I understand you just fine, but when you put on that YouTube video of the guy in Colombia, it just doesn't, it doesn't process. So that's the benefit that I see in this particular thing, is tuning our L2 learners' ears to Native speech.
And TJ, one thing I want to say about this strategy is also when they're in pairs, it's a safe zone for students. So they can really, they can explore with the language, they can make mistakes, they can try their hardest, but they're not going to be put on blast in front of the class. You know, if they're afraid to make a mistake, or if they're afraid to speak in front of people in the target language. So this is really good. And I saw someone mention in the chat box, this is a great classroom culture building activity. And I totally agree with that.
Yes. And as we mentioned earlier, that in order to be considered biliterate, that we need to master all three modes of communication. And this interpersonal speaking is, that's exactly what this strategy is all about, is that interpersonal speaking piece.
All right, next strategy is a one-pager, and this is like tried and true strategies, been around since the dawn of education. But this is just basically having students, again, take control of their own learning. That's what we want them to do in all of these strategies. So a one-pager is their reflection tool. You can see all the steps there, but it's a reflection tool to put in one page what they think about an entire topic that either they listened to or they read about. And so they're using language, they're using new expressions, they're using symbols for a visual, and then they're writing questions on the one-pager, like how they can interact with that text. So we want to teach them higher level questions, and they would include these on the one-pager. This is also great to have them do in pairs, like a 30-second expert kind of strategy, where they would share their one-pagers with each other. And then the more you can mix the classroom, the more you can pair students with different partners, they're going to be getting different opinions, different information every single time. So this is how we increase that literacy and that vocabulary in a natural way. And then we have some examples
Yep.
of one-pagers. So you can see, you know, you could use this in any content area. I've seen one-pagers in kindergarten all the way through college students. So it's really great. It's their own interpretation of whatever is, whatever the material, whatever the content is. Look this one up. You can get a big bang for the buck with this one, and it's a very rigorous strategy.
And they like doing it. It's fun.
It is
It's engaging.
fun. Yes.
The next strategy we want to mention is earlier on in the chat box. I was glad some people were mentioning when we were talking about, you know, differences between L2 learners and heritage and native learners. Some people were talking about, you know, sometimes there's spelling lacks or those sorts of things. And I would be remiss if I didn't address those things, but how do you really address those things in class? Are they done discreetly? Are they done as pop-up things? And I sort of decided 5 or 6 years ago that I just wanted them to be bits and pieces that I give them, like in the beginning of each class. These are the bell ringers that I use. We called them ortografías diarias. And it's just it's based on just random infographics that I've found on Twitter and Facebook and social media and all that good stuff. And this I found does really support literacy skills. It addresses those common issues that heritage learners have with, you know, spelling and diacritics and things without having to spend an entire lesson on teaching, you know, llana, grave, all that stuff. And like I said, it's just done as a warm-up activity, and it is assessed once a month, or even less frequently than that, maybe once per quarter. But I found that this has been just sort of something I did to tweak to not have to go into all of the rules of spelling and accentuation and different things like that. Let's take a Twitter check-in and chat check-in.
Yes, so I've been following along on Twitter. I know there are a few tweets out there. Edgar, do you want to kick us off with Twitter?
Yes, Don. Basically, yes, people I keep sharing the ideas that you guys are talking about, especially like annotating the text and just showing how important it is to really guide your students and to celebrate.
Did we lose you?
I think we
on the
lost
chat,
audio a little
lots
bit on
of
that
comments and lots of people answering comments.
Go ahead, Michael.
Someone wants to know how you can use these strategies in the virtual classroom.
That's a great question. I think that the more, and this is what I'm finding, is that the more tools you have in your own virtual toolbox of things where you can, for instance, like annotating the text. There's a great program out there called Edgy. That's EDJI. That you front load your text in there, and your students are able to go in and you can actually even upload hashtags for them. Like it can be hashtag vocabulary, hashtag main idea, and they identify pieces of that text. And it's just, I would say it's just finding the digital tools that work best for you. But I would say, I don't think there's really anything that we've mentioned thus far that I don't think can't be even, maybe it has to be adapted a little bit for in an online classroom, but I definitely recommend checking out Edgy for annotating the text and focused reading and all that good stuff. But I would say just find the tools that work best for you. It's a great question.
And Zoom could be great for an activity like 30-second expert, because you can push people out into breakout rooms and time them. So one thing about 30-second expert is, you know, they have to be concise and to the point. And so I actually would be very interested to see how that would go on Zoom, because I think it's almost the perfect platform for an activity like that.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you. Another question, someone wanted to know if either of you had used text coding for teaching literacy.
text coding. I'm not sure what that refers to, so I'm going to say no, I haven't.
I was going to ask the same question, TJ. So, I mean, I could guess what text coding could be, but I don't want to guess what that is right now.
I don't know either, so maybe we'll find out later.
Yeah, maybe on Twitter, go in and hashtag empowering with languages and give us a little explanation of in 140 characters or less of what text coding is. That'd be great.
Yeah, and also I just, before we move on, want to make sure we encourage everyone, if you have ideas for tech tools that might be used, some of you are sharing some really good ones in the chat right now. Make sure you just even pop in the name of them, because you guys will get the chat after the webinar, and you can always have that to go back for reference later. So if you have, even if you have heard of something that might be good, please do share, because that way we'll have time to be able to go dig into those later. So
Thanks, John. Great idea. So yeah, please drop those tech tools in the chat if you have any you'd like to share. So the next piece we want to chat about is how to keep our kiddos engaged with language outside the classroom. And this is as important for our heritage and native learners as it is for our L2 students. And I feel like any project you can do outside the classroom with your L2 students, by bringing those heritage and native learners in, they have so much to bring, and oftentimes a totally different perspective to bring. And the thing that we want them to see is an application for what we're advocating for them and what we're teaching them. And if they see a real application for what we're trying to teach them, I feel like that is where you're going to get your buy-in from those heritage and native learners, is by making sure that they are staying engaged and not just in that 85 minutes or 48 minutes or however long you have in your classrooms with them. And by providing these opportunities, it further extends what they're able to get at home as in the way of culture and language. And they're also able to share it with their classmates, which I think is great. Some things like service learning projects, volunteering at elementary schools, at local businesses. Something that I found to be a great engagement tool for my heritage and native learners has been Sociedad Honoraria Hispánica. Check out the AATSP website. Sorry, a little shameless plug there. Check out the AATSP website for some more information on that. I know that some schools also have SOL or MECHA or different things like that, like Student Organization of Latinos and things like that, to engage their heritage and native learners outside of the classroom. And definitely volunteering and service learning things in your area. They don't even necessarily have to be in the Spanish speaking or whatever speaking community. Like it can just be let's say you're a teacher in New Orleans, and guess what? There's going to be some people that speak Spanish, or that speak French, or that speak whatever, that are coming and attending Mardi Gras and might need some people there to help them out, and that kind of stuff. So there's some great ideas for you to keep our learners engaged outside the classroom as well, in addition to those strategies that we shared with you already. Another piece that I like to bring into my, so sometimes you'll have a separate class for your heritage and native learners, which is the case at where I've been teaching. Sometimes you won't, but what I like to do is I don't give a prescribed vocabulary to my heritage and native kiddos. I like for them to inform me of what it is that they need. And of course, you'll have essential questions that drive your your instruction for your unit and the resources you've chosen for that unit. And while, like I was saying with the annotating the text, words that they identify as key terms or words that they identify as unfamiliar are the things that become target vocabulary that will then be assessed. And we know they're going to fit into our unit because the resources that we've chosen from that unit based on our essential questions. And what I've done most recently is after we annotate the text, they add their terms to a collaborative document that everybody can access. I've done that access. I've done it Wordle style. I've done it, the word cloud type things. I've also just done old school. If I'm just having a day, guys just write it on a Post-it and stick it on the bulletin board, and then that's become a word wall for us and stuff like that. And that is what I typically have done with each unit. And I'm sure you've seen word walls used in elementary classrooms and all that good stuff. But I like to do a word wall with my heritage kids for each unit that identifies vocabulary and key terms that they need, that they are going to be responsible for when it comes time for assessment. Here's some examples of vocab walls. Palabras con el mismo sonido, pero diferentes letras. Yep, those are all great things to differentiate for our heritage learners. And Ryan.
Right, so we are so excited, Mississippi, that you will be implementing the Seal of Biliteracy, because this has been really the biggest game changer in my professional experience in world languages. We put the little Battle-Born Biliteracy logo at the top of this because that's what our state Seal of Biliteracy looks like. It was designed by a teacher right here in Nevada, and our students get that on their diplomas, and they get a medal at graduation to wear with their cap and gown. But this Seal of Biliteracy, what we really wanted to share with you is what it's going to do to motivate students in your program, to encourage students to take world language classes, to honor those students and celebrate the diversity that they bring to school. So you have to advertise and inform, especially when this is taking off. There's a lot of times that, just from experience in Nevada, there's a lot of misinformation out there. So when you can streamline the information and make sure all students get the opportunity and all of the information on earning the seal, that's the first step. And encourage heritage students to take Spanish with the seal being their ultimate goal. When it's the first couple states that implemented the Seal of Biliteracy, they pushed this out mainly for heritage and native speakers. And so now it's gone a little bit more general and inclusive of all students, but definitely encourage those heritage speakers to take this. College and career readiness through having a formal credential. I always like to tell the public that the Seal of Biliteracy is an industry certification. It is something that students leave school with, that it's a certification that they are biliterate in a language other than English. And that's why the fidelity of the Seal of Biliteracy is so important. And Avant does a ton of research and testing across the country to ensure that fidelity. So employers really look at a student with the seal and that it means something to them. Share success. So the sky is the limit here with ceremonies, graduation recognition, calling the local news, putting them on a website. One of my favorite stories of the first year we had the Seal of Biliteracy was at a local high school here that was predominantly Spanish speaking. We did a senior Seal of Biliteracy award ceremony where all the seniors got their medals, and it was so wonderful to see that the students invited their families, their parents were there, their little brothers and sisters, grandparents, cousins. They came with balloons and flowers, and I mean, you would have thought it was the actual graduation. And to look out into the audience and to see these grandparents tearing up because they were so proud of their grandchildren earning a Seal of Biliteracy in Spanish was amazing. So I encourage you to do that. Align with Mississippi colleges and universities to try to begin that discussion of granting credit to students graduating with a seal, or if credit isn't an option, having students get something from the college or the university, whether it's skipping a couple classes or something. It's an extra carrot for students. And then, like I said, Seal of Biliteracy has been such a huge game changer in Nevada. We have seen statewide our numbers in world language classes just go through the roof in some areas. And now we have students seeking languages that we don't even teach in some of our schools to get that language background so they could earn multiple Seals of Biliteracy. So really, it is just, you know, it's the icing on the cake. And when you see how excited students are to graduate with the Seal of Biliteracy, it'll make this this challenge of implementation all worth it. I promise. If not, you could come back and tell me that, Ryan, you were wrong. But I think it is going to be a game changer for sure.
Definite game changer, and definitely something you want to start advertising and informing, like Ryan said, from first year. They should know that from their first year in your classes, that there is this carrot dangling that they can strive for. And honestly, I think you will see a difference in your upper level enrollment. You'll have kids that'll stay with you for your entire program, whereas a lot of times with our heritage and native kiddos, that when we don't have a heritage program, what happens is, oh, okay, you're just going to go to level 3, you're just going to start an AP, and then as freshmen, and then after their freshman year, they're done, and we don't see them again. And we want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them in our classes. We want our upper level courses to be well attended by our heritage and native learners and stuff. So yeah, that's been our experience here in Nevada.
And TJ and I have a lot of experience with this because we fought hard in Nevada for the Seal of Biliteracy and implementing it statewide with our state organization as kind of that vehicle to implement it first off, like right out of the gates, and to ensure that fidelity with it, because I think that's really important. You know, if there's not a lot of fidelity to it, it starts meaning less and less to students. So again, don't ever come with making assumptions about students. Go with celebrate with the language they bring into the class, and you know, really the sky is the limit with the Seal of Biliteracy.
Yes. And that brings us to questions. And maybe we can turn it to Michael or Edgar to see if we have any questions coming up on Twitter or in our Q&A. I don't think we've checked that Q&A piece.
Well, on Twitter, people just keep sharing how happy they are with the topic. and also that they are very proud of how when they are teaching their heritage learners. And I think, thank you guys for encouraging the state of Mississippi to continue to advocate for students and to celebrate their achievement. Mike?
Michael, I think you may be muted. There you go. Okay.
I had actually looked in the Q&A, and one person was based in the wrong area, so there's nothing really there that we have to worry about. Some people were asking who pays for the tests that these students do.
That's a great question.
Is it the parents?
That's a great question. And my answer is it's going to vary from, in my experience, it varies from school to school, district to district, state to state. Here in my county, it was, in my district, it was negotiated that the district world language office would pay for it. And that's how it's been since we've started. I know that's different in the northern part of the state. I know some places where it's subsidized, some places where it's the student pays it. So that's kind of all over the place. I'm not sure what Mississippi's plans are for assessing.
It's a great project for a state association to advocate that the State Department of Ed funds these programs, because we don't ever want a student to miss out on an opportunity for the inability to pay for a test.
Right, and there's a couple pieces of legislation at the federal level, the Bilingual Education Seal and Testing Act, that a number of us have been advocating for the last few years, that will provide some, that would provide some funding for the proficiency assessments. I also know of some districts where like if you have a Spanish club or a student organization of Latinos or Sociedad Honoraria, where those organizations have paid for members of their organization to take those assessments too. So that's another idea. Involve your kiddos in that.
I see a couple of questions about American Sign Language. And yes, we do offer the seal of biliteracy in American Sign Language. Of course, the test is much different than other language assessments, but we do offer it. And then right now we're trying to, we have Paiute in our state, and now we have Paiute language at our university. And so we're developing a way to, for Paiute students to earn the seal of biliteracy also. It's challenging though, because it's not a written language. So, but we're going to still call it the seal of biliteracy.
Right. Are there any other questions that we wanted to address? Because I think we have another, well, we're pretty much taking care of that Twitter and chat check-in now.
There was a question someone had about the ortografía diaria.
Yeah.
How to assess it. I don't know.
So here's how I've assessed it is, so let's say it was, there was something like the word hoy, which means today in Spanish, which sometimes the H will be omitted. And what I would do is I take several of them and write sentences that are really messed up and have them correct them. And that's how we practice them in class anyways. So that's how my assessment works on that. And I'm happy to share those assessments. Not that they're the greatest in the world, but I'm happy to share those assessments with anybody. My email is in the beginning of that presentation. Just shoot me an email and I'm happy to share.
Awesome. Thank you, TJ. And there was also a question that someone had about information for schools that are not public schools. And I know, Edgar, that may be something that you might want to address with them in the state of Mississippi. But if you did not join us for the first or second webinar, there is a lot of information about how to get the seal. The first webinar was the global seal, which is what a lot of private schools choose to use that route to get the seal of biliteracy for their students. And that was the first webinar we did in this series. And it is uploaded on the YouTube channel that you'll get a link to. And there's also information for the state of Mississippi in the second webinar that we did, where the state of Mississippi gave specifics around how to get the seal in the state of Mississippi. So if you haven't checked those out, make sure you look into those, because there's a lot of really good information in those webinars as well.
I think that's a great question. And in Nevada, you know, of course it varies by school district, but in my school district, we included all of the charter schools, private schools, homeschool students. So they would all have the opportunity to earn the seal. And even though it went through the school district, we just thought it was important to not leave any students out.
Yeah, that's something you can look at the wording in your in the law that was passed for your seal and see if private schools are included in the state one, or if they would need to go the global route, like John was mentioning.
Right. It really just depends on how the wording is in that documentation at the state level, right, as to whether they'll allow it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, you guys, I have included, I put the link to the survey into the chat for you guys, but do know that as you go leave today, I'm going to try your trick, TJ. Okay, there we go. As you go to leave today, there should be a link that pops up. Last time, somehow that was corrupted. I don't know what happened, but the link is in the chat right now. So grab that link before you leave the chat. If you would like to get your certificate, just take a few seconds to complete the brief survey, and then you'll be able to get to the certificate. Should something happen weird, you will get a link via your email tomorrow. And tomorrow, the email will have a link to the participant folder, the certificate, and the slide deck, the chat, and the poll results. Some of you had asked about if you could get the poll results. So that I will also make sure and put that in the folder for you guys as well. And before we go, I would just want to say again how much I appreciate TJ, you and Ryan taking the time to share all these ideas for literacy strategies and ways to involve the whole community, all the students, and give them opportunities to work towards reaching biliteracy and bilingualism. Thank you guys for being with us today.
Thanks for having us. This was a blast. Thank you.
And Edgar, I don't know if you or Michael want to also just let everyone know about the webinar, good gracious, the conference coming up in the fall for Mississippi.
Yes, the Mississippi Foreign Language Association will have its conference, a virtual conference, on December the 1st through the 5th. We had to change our dates from what we usually do each year. So we welcome your abstracts for our presentations, and we'll be glad to look over them and look forward to seeing you then. Thanks.
So you guys make sure that you follow us on social media, both MFLA and More Learning. We will also be posting information about more upcoming webinars in the next few weeks, and also some other professional learning opportunities later this summer that are in the works right now. We're just so glad that you could join us for this series. Edgar and Michael, I've spent a lot of time with you guys in the last few weeks. Thank you so much for partnering with us to make this series possible.
Well, thank you, Dawn, for having us. It has really been a pleasure, certainly a new experience for me, and one that I really appreciate. Thank you.
Don, thank you. There are no words for me to express my gratitude to all of you. It has been amazing. We had great presenters, great attendance. Thank you all who were part of this webinar series. We are very humble and thankful that you were here with us, spending your summertime. Thank you, everybody, and thank you to all the panelists that were sharing their time with us. We really appreciate the support for our state teachers and for the others around the nation, and also for those who visit us from other countries. Thank you very much. Thank you, Don.
Absolutely. So you guys don't forget to continue the conversation on Twitter at #EmpoweringWithLanguages. You guys can keep that conversation going. And that's all for us today. I hope that you all have a wonderful summer. And I guess we will all continue to see each other virtually for right now. So thank you so much. I'm Dawn Samples from More Learning. Bye-bye.